and good morning, friends. Today we're going on an adventure to try and figure out what type of system are we working with, because the county records show two different systems and this homeowner doesn't know what they're working with. So we're going to go ahead and figure this out. So before we do this though, let's go ahead and take a look at the county records, see what they say, see what's supposed to be in the ground, and then we're going to go take a look, see what's actually in the ground, and see if we can figure this out. All right, so we have our county records. We can see here that it's supposed to be a 750-gallon tank to tile fields. So this is very common in this area, right? Especially with these older homes. So what a tile field is basically just gonna be terracotta piping lined up with little holes open in it so that way the water can escape. At least that's how we refer to them in our area. So we have two different drawings that we're working with. We have this one right here, which shows a tank and two drain fields. And then we have this one right here, which shows a tank to a dry well. Now, when we get here, we need to figure out which of these two is the correct system. So more than likely, it's gonna be this one right here that shows tank, distribution box, trenches running across the property. And the reason I say that is the permit specifically says tile fields. It's not common to have the permit say one thing, the picture shows something completely different, and have another picture that shows what the original permit says it should show. So when we go outside, we should see this setup. So let's go ahead, take a peek, see what we're working with. Alrighty, so we've just gone ahead and looked at the records. So we know we have the front of the tank right here with this terracotta clean out. Usually these would just have a stone that just kind of sits right on top just like that. Not my favorite, but they work. And then we have a riser on the back. So in a second, we're gonna pop this off and we're gonna see where does it go? Because remember, those records show we either have drain fields or dry wells, and our job today is to figure out what do we have. So let's go ahead, pop these open, take a look inside and see what we're working with. All right, so we've got the lid off of the front and the back, and this is actually gonna be the inside of the tank. So we can see here that we have our baffle right there. So the general goal of the back baffle is to keep all that floating stuff, the scum, from getting into the pipe and causing clogs. So most of these baffles will look very similar to this. Now, take note, the water level is incredibly low. So a known defect in this area for these types of systems would be the mid-seam of the tank. So we can see that the water level is low, and it's roughly at about the halfway point. So there's a good chance that this thing is leaking from the middle of the tank. And the reason why, this house has been vacant for a little bit, and it's been several years since anybody's pumped the tank, supposedly. So in a minute, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that fancy sludge judge right there, and we're gonna measure the solids inside of here. While we're doing that, we're also gonna take a look a little bit closer at the seam, which you can see right where the water level is sitting at, right at the bottom. And we're gonna see if we can figure out what's going on with this tank. Usually, if you have a leaking tank, you're gonna end up having to replace it. And unfortunately, that's an additional expense that nobody wants to have to pay. So let's go ahead, take a look inside the tank, and then we're gonna grab our camera and we're gonna go and run the camera this way to see if we can figure out what type of absorption system are we working with. Okay, so we've gone ahead, we've opened everything up, we've run the camera through the pipe, and we found where we believe the distribution box to be located is. Now, this box is about 7 feet below the surface, which kind of sucks because it basically goes straight out of the tank, straight down into the box. So that makes it a little bit harder to find for sure. But because we have a distribution box, now we know there are at least 2 legs to the absorption system. Remember how on the records we saw there was either 1 pit or 2 drain fields. So because there's a distribution box, that means inherently there's going to be drain fields on this system. So we've already figured out that first part. Now, the other part we have to figure out was the leaking septic tank, right? So when we look inside the tank, the water level's about the halfway mark. You can see the mid-seam all the way around. So when you're trying to determine if the tank's leaking, you have to look at that seam and see what's going on. So in the back of the tank, we see what looks like maybe a little bit of root intrusion, but not enough to be very convincing. It's not until we go to the front of the tank and we look through the clean out. Through the clean out over here, on that side, we'll actually see a bunch of little root fingers working their way up out of the water and into the top of the wall. So that means the roots are coming in from over here. So this is going to be the point of our leak. Usually in our area, if you have a leak in the septic tank, it's not worth repairing. You just end up going straight to replacing the tank. And the reason why is the amount of effort and time that it takes to repair a tank is basically the same amount of cost as a new one. Now, maybe your area is a little bit different, but in our area, almost nobody is gonna, I would say 99.9 out of 10, 100 people nobody's going to warranty a repair to a leaking tank. And in my opinion, if a contractor's not willing to warranty their work, it's not worth having that work done. So if somebody's saying that, you want to make sure that you at least get a new tank, so that way you know that you have a good warranty going in and that tank's going to last. You don't have to worry about replacing it again for quite a while. Usually our tanks in our area will last about 60 to 80 years, give or take. This tank is from the early 70s. It's made it this far, right? Now, unfortunately, the seals failed on the middle of the tank and roots are coming in, so they need to address it. But the concrete's still there. Right, so the next question would be, well, we've got a leaking tank. We can't fix it. What do we do? And obviously we've already discussed that we're going to replace this. So now you got to figure out, well, do we stick with concrete or do we stick with plastic? Now, my opinion is you should never get a plastic tank installed. And the reason why, those things don't last as long. If you don't pump them right, they will collapse. And they're just, I don't know, I've not come across one that was built to last as long as a concrete one does. Concrete obviously is more expensive, it's heavier, it's more annoying to work with, but it's probably your best bet to make sure that this thing's going to last for as long as it can. Now, some complicating factors to determine whether or not you go with plastic or concrete. If you have a very, very steep hill or just an inaccessible area where they can't get a tank setting truck back there, basically think about like one of those big long flatbeds that you see from like Home Depot and stuff. Like they're a large piece of equipment, and concrete's heavy, so it's going to be a lot of weight. So you have to make sure that it's safe enough for the driver to get the tank into the backyard, front yard, wherever it is, set the tank, and be able to get out of the property. So concrete's the main way to go. But if you have any of those other site conditions that you can't really work with, that's where plastic comes into play. As long as you know going into it that a plastic tank will not last as long, it's not as strong, then you're fine, right? But if you're told that it'll be just as good and you think it is, it's not really going to be that good, right? So long story short, for this particular one, we were able to find their absorption system. We were able to determine that yes, they have drain fields, not a dry well, but in the process of doing that, we've uncovered that they have another issue. This is why it's a very important thing to make sure that you have these things checked before you purchase a home. Also, kind of like how I do it is, if we find a defect, we don't do the repair. Just say, hey, here's the facts, here's what's going on, here's people in the area who can help get you straightened out. And the reason we do it that way is so that way you know that you're not getting shafted on a repair. I don't care if you fix it, right? I want to make sure that you get it done right and that everything's done correctly, and we're here to kind of make sure that people know that. Now, this kind of thing doesn't happen super often. It does suck when it does happen, but sometimes that's just how it is, part of homeownership, right? So the lesson to be learned from this is when you have a home, if you're purchasing a home, make sure you get inspections. But if you have the home and you've been living there for a while, set some money aside for repairs. Things are going to break, right? No matter what you do, no matter how well you're taking care of the house, something's going to eventually break and you're going to get stuck with a bill. By having some money set aside, something like this happens, you're able to weather that storm a little bit more efficiently. And once you do it, you're not doing it again until you either move or die, right? An 80-year-old tank will outlive most people that are around right now. I hope that you found this useful. I hope that you found this informative. If you enjoy this kind of content, hit that like button, hit subscribe. I have more videos posted every day on the world of well and septic. And until next time, guys.